I started this channel as a way to bring my games of Civ 6 to life and tell the stories of history that they contained. Committing myself to a video per week, obviously, I needed to find ways to explore the Civilization games beyond my playthroughs. There's only so much gaming a 40-year-old can fit into one's life. With the launch of Civ 7 and the various responses from the Civ 5 crowd, as well as insights gleaned from the comments of creators and lovers of Civ 4, I began to take a more serious look at the games themselves in an attempt to understand why I loved some games more than others. In so doing, I took a microscope to certain mechanics as they have shown up over the course of the series and tried to determine if they were effective in making Civ games more fun, or if they interfered with the spirit of what I believed the original Civ games were built on. No one holds any official uncontested opinion on what makes a Civ game, or what makes them more fun, and in investigating some of those mechanics, I sparked the ire of fanatics of certain iterations of the game. But the truth is, no Civ game has ever achieved perfection, even if some games are more fun than others. But then, more fun how? What does more fun mean? If one could objectively state what makes a game fun, how would one then build upon that knowledge to design a better Civ game? Suede, in a recent YouTube video titled "Civilization is Turning into a Board Game," wonderfully elucidates two opposing board game development ideologies that have influenced the way Civ developers have tried to inject fun into their Civ games. These ideologies are divided into European and Ameritrash-style games, where European-style games are more abstract and involve greater planning. They are engine-building games, according to Suede, and Ameritrash-style games are more cutthroat, rely on a lot of luck, and have more elimination and player interaction. Anyone remember Herson's video about interaction? Suede's video is great, and I will leave a link to it in the description. And for what it's worth, any fans of my channel that don't know about or regularly check out Suede's work, well, you should. But for this video, I don't want to focus on these game design ideologies per se, but instead I want to talk about two other opposing game design philosophies that have come home to roost in Civ 7 and that I worry might tear the Civilization franchise apart. In engaging with the Civ community, I've noticed that adherents to the respective opposing playstyles I will mention are at odds with what makes a Civ game great and in fact what makes a Civ game a Civ game. It's a problem that developers need to address because it's a controversy lodged at the most basic level. In order to solve it once and for all, someone probably needs to exhume Sid and reanimate him just so he can give a final and lasting verdict. The problem I'm talking about is tall or wide. Welcome to Civilization Stories, where we examine alternatives to history through the lens of the world's most addictive video game. Fans of the channel are likely to suspect that my own feelings fall pretty far to one side. I've made no bones about how I feel on the subject that Civilization is a game about empire building. In the history of empires, none have ever stated, "We've got 4 cities, I think we're good, now let's build some rockets and fly to the moon." And in this video, I'm not going to try to make an even case or argue both sides. I think I mentioned Uruguay in a previous video, sorry Uruguay, stating that I thought it was absurd to suggest that one should be able to win the epic battle of civilization by emulating what Uruguay is today, versus winning said battle by building Uruguay in such a way as to become more like a global superpower, similar to present-day America, Great Britain, Russia, or China. And if anyone out there is thinking, well, Great Britain isn't exactly that huge or building rockets to the moon, my response would be, yeah, now, but not for lack of trying. And it's the same for territorially smaller nations from the modern day that you might think ought to have a chance at winning the game. Think Japan or Germany or France. The truth is, all of them have taken their shot at imperialism and wide territorial expansion, just like Egypt, Greece, Rome, and Persia centuries before them. But that's the beauty of Civ games. They are built on the idea of alternatives to history. Players were never meant to play as Shaka of the Zulu, live a rural life for some centuries before getting scrappy in an attempt to fight off colonialism and then succumbing to the British, only to achieve independence later on. In Civ, they were meant to kick some serious ass and maybe absorb Britain into their empire so that people could more sensibly drive on the right side of the road and not be so resistant to the metric system. Of Civilization's 7 major releases, only 2 of them can be said that playing tall is a viable, even optimal strategy that can be used to achieve victory. They are Civ 5 and Civ 7. Civ 7 is trying to do something different, which is it is trying to be all things to all people.
Believing in everything at the same time is the same as not believing in anything at all.
But in so doing, it has made a mess of its mechanics, inviting masters of the Civ game to find the perfect combo. A history of Civ games might look a bit like this. It began as an empire-building game, continued as an empire-building game, further continued as an empire-building game, continued even further as an empire-building game, became a sophisticated puzzles players could solve, became a sophisticated empire-building game players could master, and finally became a sophisticated puzzle players could turn into their works of art. The most common refrain I hear from lovers of Civ 5 is that of all of the Civ games, they find it the most approachable. The thing about most, and especially older Civ games, even on lower difficulties, is that they are highly competitive. Civ 5, less so. Sure, there are the odd races to build certain wonders and to speed through the tech and civics trees, but by and large, players could be successful doing their own thing without needing to disrupt or be disrupted by the AI, assuming they are engaging with certain of the diplomacy mechanics in just the right way. It's more about discovering synergies and lining up dominoes in the perfect pattern until you get to the end game and topple the first one. What happened is that the base of Civ players expanded and players found new ways to play the game, leading to developers devising new ways to win the game. The risk-centered idea of a game based around the struggle for world domination became diluted by new ways to get a gold medal. And a lot of those other ways to win turned out to be a lot less micro, which apparently some players really like. This is also how we got legacy paths, clear, definable objectives pointing the way to the victory of your choice. In Civ 6, although the paths to the various victory types were more murky than in Civ 7, they added the diplomacy victory, which I do find kind of fun, but which is quite literally winning the story of civilization by being everyone's best friend. Congratulations, you are Bhutan. Is that what Civilization the game, a game built on combat and competition over territory, resources, and power, was supposed to be about? When Civ 5 went the route of playing tall, many of its mechanics were specifically designed to address Civ's pervasive, infinite city sprawl problem. Civ has been fumbling at this for decades now. We've seen corruption, amenities shortages, settlement caps, and of course Civ 5's infamous happiness mechanic, whose design became a massive overcorrection, loved by those who enjoy solving puzzles, which developers then wrapped in the Civilization brand. Civ games are becoming echoes of the cutthroat struggle for global power that we once had, and Civ developers have leaned into the sensibilities of Suede's European model for game design, pushing synergies, instances of if X happens, you get Y to the fore. Players are no longer tasked with building an empire so much as they are with building a country and flirting with empire building. Civ 7 asks, whatever you build something you believe in, unless it's an empire, because imperialism is bad. I tease, but it's kinda true. I'm not trying to suggest that the European model is a bad way to design games, and with all of the smaller games that exist within each Civ game, designing from that perspective can add depth in many areas. But I don't think that building synergies and the ultimate combo should be the one true aim of Civilization. I'm also not trying to suggest that whoever builds the largest empire, i.e. the Civ with the most cities, wins the game. Obviously, players want the game to have more depth than that. But what I am trying to suggest is that Civ developers need to sit down and codify what Civilization the game is. Is it an empire-building game, or is it a puzzle with layers of synergies that players are tasked to solve? Is it a game about vertical or horizontal expansion, or where one is understood to be at service to the other? What I think is most important is that everyone come to the realization that it can't be both, and it certainly can't be everything. I'm not suggesting throwing the baby out with the bathwater and removing player incentive to build strong cities. To the contrary, I would actually like to see stronger city management mechanics, where the growth of cities begins to match in importance with the movement of units on the map. But I would also like to see players needing to make bolder moves and bigger swings in order to gain an edge. I'd like to see more eliminations. It's one of the reasons I've really started to enjoy playing games of Civ 6 on more crowded maps. You can more easily see the results of ancient struggles. The other alleged problem that developers have addressed by attempting to curb infinite city sprawl is snowballing. In my video about Civ 6's win condition, I made the argument that nobody has ever lost a game by domination. I guess in Civ 7 it's possible since the victory is no longer domination but militaristic, and the conditions have changed drastically. But it's well established that the AI is incapable of pressing its advantage and eventually settles upon its gains when it concludes a military conflict. Even the most aggressive leaders, leading the most militaristic civilizations, satisfy themselves with minimal gains to then push, seemingly half-heartedly, to a softer win condition. And this is where the real long-time weakness in Civ games lies, in how it handles diplomacy. Sometimes it feels like diplomacy is the one area of the game they've never thought of tampering with as a means to curb snowballing and ICS. Why? In every Civ game, diplomacy involves little more than how players handle relations separately with every other Civ in the game. There are no multilateral agreements or complex coalitions. The closest attempt at this is the military emergency or other emergency types in Civ 6. But these emergencies last only 30 turns, at the end of which, whichever side wins the emergency earns some type of reward. It's another European-style if X happens, you get Y situation. In order to curb snowballing, I think the most sensible path is for the game to include large treaties whose stated aims are to curb the expansion of aggressive players. So if the Zulu conquer X% of Britain, swelling their empire to 10 cities or whatever, can trigger the mechanic. Britain can form a coalition with another neighbor, say Spain, specifically as a way to deter the aggression of the Zulu. Let's call this treaty the Spanglish Defense Alliance Treaty, SDAT. Once this treaty is formed, anyone can join. So let's say Japan, whose borders do not directly touch the Zulu, but they are also concerned about Zulu aggression, can apply for membership to SDAT. Spain and England can now vote on whether to admit them into the treaty. If Australia subsequently want to join, then England, Spain, and Japan can all now vote to admit them or not. What I think this could do is, besides helping to curb a single Civ's aggression, is it could help to form blocks. If a treaty member behaves badly, unilaterally invades a peaceful neighbor, for example, or sells strategic resources to someone outside the treaty, members could vote to expel them. Overall, this means fracturing the World Congress into smaller cells in which only admitted civilizations can interact. Focusing on making diplomacy far more robust than it has ever been is an area ripe with opportunity to improve the complexity of the game in ways it has never seen. As enjoyable as it is to focus on synergies, adjacencies, and yields, it is the opinion of this commentator that this aspect of Civ games has been pushed now beyond the limits of what anyone ever asked for. Instead of leaning into further development of what has been Civilization's strengths over the last 20 years, it's time for developers to plunge energy and resources into areas that have long been the game's weaknesses. Converting diplomatic favor into influence and combining diplomacy and espionage into a single screen has done little to improve diplomacy. In fact, these are arguably steps back. I stated at the beginning that this video was meant to address Civ's persisting tall versus wide problem. So in summary, I think Civ developers need to recognize that Civ, as much as they might want it to be, cannot be everything. Second, they should devise a mission statement that outlines what kind of game Civilization is at its root. Not just a 4X game, but what experience does it strive to give players? And I think that Civilization should be an empire-building game. There's a lot of wiggle room in terms of what that can mean, but here I mean that it should be a game where players, all players, human and AI, strive to push the boundaries of their territory and their influence as far as possible. One of the deepest incentives in the game should be to stretch wide. There's nothing wrong with a 4X game about the history of civilizations that is focused solely on synergies and playing tall, but I think that that is a different game. Developers should seek to include a balanced and strategic number of mechanics that embrace both European and Ameritrash game designs. Lastly, in order to curb the pitfalls in the game that come from being incentivized to grow wide, things like snowballing and infinite city sprawl, developers should focus less on mechanics that interfere with synergies like corruption, happiness, and settlement caps, and devise much more robust diplomacy engines that make civilizations' cooperation as the key barrier to a single Civ's ambitions. But what do you think? Could Civ the game be all things to all people? Should it be a tall game or a wide game? Also, if you like this video, please subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. And before I let you go, I want to mention one other great way to support the channel. I recently published my first book, and it is available for purchase through Amazon in paperback and Kindle formats. It's a collection of short stories from around the world about a variety of subjects centered around 21st century digital nomadism. It's for anyone with an interest in reading what it's like to live as a digital nomad, live through a revolution, travel through less charted parts of southern Africa, or meet Winnie the Pooh. It's a book that is meant to encourage people from all walks of life to travel and hopefully see the world a little bit differently and not as such a fearful place as we are often led to believe, because there is kindness everywhere. I will leave a link to my book in the description. Okay, there's my plug. Thank you for supporting the channel. And thanks for watching to the end of this episode. And remember to keep playing and making your own civilization, your own amazing path through history, and I'll see you next time.